Why explore the mathematics of consciousness? There have been 10,000 cults, 10,000 cultures in human history, each with their own language, mythology, biases, and values. And one of the most important things to understand about cults is that they always believe that they are right. It doesn't shift much when we bring the cult down to the individual level. We all think we're right as well. And if you look at it objectively, what are the odds that out of 10,000 cults, 10,000 belief systems, biases, habits, protocols, that we are the right one? And the odds have to be assumed to be about 1 in 10,000 that we're right. How certain are we that we are right? 100%. Our way of doing things is definitely better than doing things the way they do them in Saudi Arabia. It's better than doing things the way they do them in Thailand. It's better than doing things the way they do them in Denmark. We are right because we are right, and we are right because we are right, and that's why we're right. It's completely self-referential. And it's very easy for a cult to reinforce itself using the flimsy excuse of norms. Well, everyone's doing it, so I'm doing it, and I'm doing it because everyone's doing it, and everyone's doing it because everyone's doing it, and that's why we're doing it. And this is the way it is. Don't rock the boat. And the underlying function of cults can be seen in this way. The underlying function of cults is to provide a stable status quo that allows the conscious thinking mind to go to sleep most of the time without fear. Because what's happening today is what happened yesterday, and most of us are still alive. And what's happening yesterday happened the day before, and most of us are still alive. And so why not go to sleep and say that that's good enough for me? That's the service that a cult provides. And this is an algorithm behind a large volume of our social and human decisions. I may not like this person, but if everyone likes this person, he's good enough for me. I may think it's a little bit odd to chop the tip of my son's penis off, but hey, if everyone's doing it, it's good enough for me. I may think it's a little bit odd that God is a man, apparently. So who gave birth to God? You see, because every man is born out of a woman. Who gave birth to God? Well, this may seem a little bit odd, but hey, if everyone's believing it, that God is a man, who am I to judge? Who am I to go against the flow? In other words, most of us are still alive. So whatever it is that most of us are doing and thinking and feeling and believing, it's good enough for me. Of course, in the times of Galileo, everyone thought the world was flat. Everyone thought that the universe revolved around the earth. No one was dead believing that truth or that lie. And so it was good enough for everyone else. And who is this little upstart to come along and start thinking? And so the cult serves the function of preserving a status quo at literally 9,999 odds to 1, that it is the best status quo, that it is factually based, that it is terribly intelligent relative to other status quos. Because the other thing we know from anthropology is that each cult does something a little bit better than another cult. Some cults do a good job fishing. Other cults do a good job protecting the earth for 7 generations. Other cults do a great job of disciplining and creating a spiritual warrior. Other cults do a good job at bringing more material goods faster, many of which we don't need, than any cult in human history, and cutting down the planet to do so in the process. Every cult has a specialty. However, it is hard to make the case that any cult got anything 100% right. So we turn to mathematics because mathematics has an underlying framework that allows us to break away from some of the cult biases and blind spots that every cult produces. Because that's how you shut off the conscious mind. That's how you stop thinking. You create blind spots and biases. There's a theft in the store. Well, everyone knows who did that in this cult. It was the black kid. There's a problem at home. Someone broke the pot. Well, everyone knows it's Cinderella, the orphan, the stepchild. Disease is moving through the country. Well, we all know it's the homeless. They're not taking their vitamins, etc. It's the homeless fault. In a cult that worships money, the poor are to blame. In a racist cult, the minority is to blame. In a cult that is based on family system and blood and marriage and puritanical values, the stepchild, the orphan, is to blame. We all know that. In a fucked up, sociopathic, chauvinistic cult, we all know that when something goes wrong, the woman is to blame. She didn't satisfy me enough, so of course I had to cheat. It's her fault, Every cult has its bias, and every bias is reinforced. Slaves are animals, blacks are slaves. Why should we bother educating animals? Well, it's a waste of time. Just look at them. They have no education. We're beating them and treating them like animals, and they look like animals. So if they're animals, why would we treat them any different? On the other hand, you treat a human being like a human being, with dignity and equality, with belief in their future, you invest in their education, and suddenly they look like human beings. Every cult has its bias. And mathematics gives a reality check to the conscious mind that has been lulled into sleep, which is, of course, the primary function of the cult. We don't want to be on hyper alert in a traumatized cult about everything. We want to go with the flow a lot of the time. We want to rest the analytical conscious mind because it takes less energy to rest. Now, all cults were born out of a certain time in the past, out of a certain circumstance, and the norms of a cult were formed by what allowed the majority of people to survive in a given environment that was often sociopathic, toxic, and insane. You get chauvinism with large planetary volatility and environmental crises. Why? Men have stronger bodies than women, statistically speaking. Men and the masculine principle is about zeroing in on the detail and responding under fire, the hunter focus, under fire in a crisis. If your family has a strong, survival-oriented man who knows how to hunt and fight, your family will survive more than if you do not. In an earthquake, whether there's a man leading your group has an impact when there are no machines, when there are no cars. So we get a cult of chauvinism, the elevation of the strong alpha male in response to natural disasters, war, trauma, and disease. However, a strong alpha male has no benefits in a partnering culture, in a partnering society. And the only benefits of this strong alpha in the business or capitalist field, where the traumas of our time are committed, is the biological memory of fear that a strong, large individual with confidence presents. Because statistically speaking, our bodies know that when a smaller body with hesitation and a lack of certainty encounters a larger body with confidence, the larger body with confidence always wins. And we are prioritizing survival. Thus we get the bluster, the lies, the deceptions of everyone practicing the art of looking competent or looking confident, rather than practicing the skill of becoming competent. So a given bias, there have been cultures in our human history that are matriarchal, that are far more intelligent in terms of their yield on well-being. And this brings in, I think, an opportunity to bring in another paradigm that is mathematically based, which is the definition of intelligence. Now, we're taught that if we go to kindergarten and junior high school or middle school and junior high school and high school and college, that we will come out intelligent. Now, this is, of course, our cults, and we will learn algebra, we will learn mathematics, we will learn language, we will learn history, we will learn biology, we will learn chemistry. But very interestingly, we will not learn how to deal with the crisis of our parents' marriage, with the crisis of the traumatic abuse cycle, both within school, within the government, and within our home. A child who is beaten black and blue at 6 years old will go into a school where he will be humiliated for his wounds, where his teacher will look at him in fear because she does not want to confront an abusive parent and get fired by her principal for making the principal's job more difficult. And that 6-year-old boy will be asked to ignore the beatings at home, to ignore the fear of death, to ignore the sugar that shouldn't be racing in his body, to ignore the fact that no grown-up male or female in his entire circle will stand up for his right, for his opportunity to grow into a human being rather than a reptilian survival instinct by triggering the trauma centers of his 200-million-year-old crocodile brain that is designed to survive a sociopathic environment. He will learn nothing that matters to him in becoming a human being from this ordeal, and it will be called an education. He will be chided as he is remembering and ruminating as a 6-year-old unable to break the cult system of parental secrecy and shame and abuse of the child. He will be ruminating frantically. How can I keep mom alive? How can I keep mom alive? How can I keep mom alive? And he will be rapped with a ruler, humiliated in front of the class. Joey, when was this bridge built in Charleston, Pennsylvania? I don't know. The fucking date of a bridge built hundreds of years ago is not on the top of my priority list. I've got 2 giants at home that are fucked up. This cult fucked them up. They went through your school system that didn't teach a single ounce of parental literacy. And you told them that their degree made them intelligent? I've got more important things to think about than see, spot, run. Go fuck yourself. That would be intelligent. But that's not what happens. That's not what happens. The child is shamed for their intelligence, shamed for the fact that their mind is more intelligent than the cult that they're in, which is why their mind is trying to figure out how to escape the bullies, how not to be humiliated in front of girls that are as sociopathic as the boys and laugh when the big pick on the small in an abuse cult, where the sociopathic treatment of children at home becomes the sociopathic treatment of the strong to the weak in school as children copy parents who are not intelligent and will get no support to become so. Instead, the message is given 10,000 times. If you're not watching my little show up in front of the room, you're a loser. You have no value. But, of course, the child already knows that. If they had value, why would dad hurt his mother that he needs to survive? If he had value, why would dad abandon the home? If he had value, why would he be hit for interrupting the fight? If he had value, wouldn't he be more interesting than another bottle of beer? If he had more value, wouldn't he be given proper shoes rather than the money going off to the casino? We don't have an intelligent cult. In large sections of our behavior, in large sections of our psyche, in large sections of the population, in large sections of the legal system, in large sections of the healthcare system, the education system, we do not have an intelligent cult. But it is rammed down the next generation with the sociopathic cruelty of an abuse survivor intent on not being left alone in the loneliness, the shame, and the misery and powerlessness that every child feels facing these large, giant forces around them that make no sense, that are cruel, but that does no good to speak the truth about. It just earns you a clip on the ear, a humiliating comment by the teacher, a rejection from the girl in favor of dogma, in favor of reiterating and re-embodying cult norms. So this is the problem with every cult. Every cult is blind, and its primary function is to allow people to sleep, resting on the waves of normalcy as they go up and down, up and down, joy and pain, in the endless cycle, of suffering and incremental progress. So mathematics allows us to break the system. And here's how. Everyone knows in a racist cult that the black kids stole the money. Mathematics allows us to overlay data with the biases of the cult. The data says the money was stolen from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. The black kid was not at the register. The white kid was. Well, surely the black kid did it anyway, right? The bias of the cult rear up. Now let's get him anyway. But the data challenges the cult. The data challenges the system. The data says maybe the cult is wrong. And this is, of course, why everyone gets so upset. When we understand the truth that every cult is wrong a large percentage of the time, we have to start thinking again, which means we have to be responsible for our thoughts, which takes a lot more energy and feels a lot more risky than following the tide. The tide goes up, I go up with the tide. The tide goes down, I go down with the tide. I don't have to think. I just do what the majority around me does. And since they are still alive in some semblance of existence, I will just be like them. And it's very interesting to note around the world how in the various levels of objective well-being, you get 3 meals a day, you get 1 meal a day. Who feels worse? Who feels worse? Who's more alarmed by that statistic? You see, in a cult where everyone is hungry and gets 1 meal a day, no one's particularly alarmed with that norm. In a cult where everyone's getting 3 meals a day, no one's particularly alarmed by that norm. In fact, what's interesting to note in the tension between cult dogma and mathematics is that someone who is getting 3 meals a day will feel more upset, more aggrieved, more angry if they are the only one in their group not to get dessert than the person who has 1 meal a day shared fairly with a group in which everyone gets 1 meal a day. No one will feel unfairly treated in that environment because we use a peer system. It's one of the things Malcolm Gladwell discovered alarmingly about the dangers of going to an Ivy League university in the United States. In an Ivy League university in the United States, if you're a scientist, you are in the top 1% of 1% of people around the globe. So, you're not in the top 1%. You're in the top, quarter of 1%. It doesn't get better than that anywhere on the planet. Fact number one. So why does a top student at a very low level university, a very low ranking university, could be free, could be, have a terrible reputation in ethics and various things like that. Why do the top students in those scientific courses produce more papers, make more scientific contributions than the bottom 20% or so of the Ivy League universities, of someone like at MIT or something like that? So you have the objective mathematics that says that the lowest 20%, meaning the 20% that get the lowest test scores at Harvard and MIT and various places in our Ivy League university, but these people are still smarter, objectively, get more right answers and all that, than the top students at crappy universities. And yet the top students at crappy universities get more done in the world than the bottom 20% or so of Ivy League universities. And the conclusion is that we do not rank ourselves based on mathematics. We rank ourselves based on social interactions in the environment that we're in. If I'm Dane Rose, and I'm hanging out with Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, Larry Page, Elon Musk, I feel like a failure in terms of my company. I feel poor in terms of my money. Whereas, if I'm hanging out in Africa or in some impoverished neighborhood where most people can't get a job, I feel like a rock star. Not because I changed, but because my relative social rank changed. In a cult that values people based on money, my value goes down when I'm surrounded by rich people. In a cult that values people based on competent thinking, my social rank goes down when I'm around incredibly smart, witty people with great memories. And we determine how important we are and what we're going to do in the world by our rank in the sphere in which we participate, which leads to a startling conclusion. You are better off being a top student at a crappy university than you are being in the lowest 20% at an Ivy League university. Because by the time you exit the Ivy League university and have watched 80% of your classmates, the smartest people on the planet in that field, perform much better than you, you will have an inferiority complex and a belief that what you have to say and do isn't all that important. And by the time you end a crappy university at the top of your class, think wrestling. You could be fat. You could have no training in wrestling. But if you're 6 foot tall and you're wrestling 10-year-olds who are, 4 feet tall, 5 feet tall, and you beat them all the time, you think you're amazing. You think you're amazing because your reality reinforces that. And so you're going to say, it's time for a career in wrestling, et cetera, et cetera. And you will grow and develop as long as you believe that you are relevant. And you will believe you're relevant when you're at the top of your field. Jordan Peterson also does some interesting calculations and presentations of research that shows that if you are the alpha, which is another way of putting this, if you are the alpha in your group, your health is better. You make more money. You get better food. You relax more. You think clearer because you're more relaxed. There's a compounding effect of being in an alpha position. And there is a compounding effect of being at the bottom of the hierarchy in which you are ranked. And that this goes back as far as mollusks and crustaceans and various things, that millions of years ago, that a crab or something, of this nature that becomes an alpha in their group will live longer, will have benefits disproportionate from being someone else in the ranking system. And the more animalistic and evolutionary the system, the more the environment is sociopathic to that which is weak. You can think of the sociopathic system involved with the hunt of a herd of giraffes. The lion takes flight in pursuit after the herd. The giraffes turn and run away. The sick, the elderly, the malnourished, the deformed, lead to the back of the pack. They drift behind the strongest, the alphas, at front. And the chasing lion picks off the weak, the poor, the elderly, the malnourished, the deformed, and never catches the alpha. And this is a sociopathic environment. This is an environment of loan sharks, where the poor need money the most so they get the highest interest rates, which means they need more money, which means they get even higher interest rates, which means they can't pay their loans, which means that they get chopped into little pieces to warn the other vulnerable members of the cult relying on loan sharks to pay their debts if they want to see their relatives alive. This is the sociopathic reptilian animal system that's 200 million years old, in which human beings are regressed down to the sociopathic state and are asked to consider themselves as no more than animals, relying on the reptilian brain to fight, flight, and freeze, for a pathological system that preys on you the more you need. You go to a bank and you need a loan that week, and you can't get a loan because you need it. You go to a bank and you've got millions in the account. You can borrow all that you want because you don't need it. You go to get a job and you're the mayor and you don't need a job, and you can get any job. You go to get a job because you're homeless on the street and you can't get a job because you really, really need a job. We're dealing with a pathological, a sociopathic cult in which might makes right and being at the top of the cult ranking system is a virtue because of the way it intersects with human needs to survive. The base human need that every human being has is to survive. And because it is a need, survival goes on the rank system as good. Now, once you've decided that to survive is good and not to survive is bad, you've got a continuum of ranking systems, which now says that a poor person is less likely to survive, so they are bad. And a really rich person is more likely to survive. That's good. That's really good. And so they are good. And so you have the phenomena where it makes sense for everyone in a sociopathic system to make way for the king. You know, when the peasants who are poor encounter the king, who is rich and powerful, Why is rich and powerful good? Because you survive more. You've decided that survival is good, and kings survive more. And they survive in pleasure. That's good too. Because if you've got survival and pleasure, you're meeting more of your human needs. And so that's good. And so the king must be good, and I must be worse. The king is more good than me because they're richer than me, they're more powerful than me, they have more pleasure than me, they have more choices than me, so I will get out of the road of the king. This is still in a pathological sociopathic system where the powerful, where the highest in the ranking system dominates and uses that power to increase their survival at the expense, usually of the lowest ranking. So in a British prep school, the system of fagging, where the elder boys bully and dominate, had a clear ranking system all the way down to the most effeminate, smallest, least educated, poorest, and newest. That this would be the individual at the bottom of the pecking order, hitting these individuals, sexually abusing these individuals, taking their money, ordering them around, publicly humiliating. For the top to completely decimate and dominate the bottom was a matter of, it was self-evident. It was a cult. It was self-evident. Why wouldn't the powerful hurt the less powerful? Why wouldn't they? Of course they would. So we have the most powerful gaining greater power by feeding on the most vulnerable. Now we're in a reptilian kingdom here. We're in a mammalian kingdom here. We're dealing with animals and the system of programming and mathematics of the animal system. And when you take consciousness out of it, this system of the strong feeding on the weak, the big feeding on the small, the old feeding on the young or middle-aged feeding on the old, that whoever has the power to dominate, to kill, to harm, is the ultimate God, the ultimate deity. The mafioso is the deity in the village because everyone bows to the one who can get you killed, to the one who can grant you favors. We're dealing with an Old Testament God. Do what I say or I will kill you. And that's it for now. Just run a few thousand years without any contact. You know, the abusive husband says, do this and never do anything different, and then takes off for a few years and then shows up and expects immediate compliance. Why didn't you do this and this and this? Of course I can go and come whenever I please, and you know, you're my woman and this and that and the other, etc. The abusive husband is no different than the abusive Old Testament God that says, these are the Ten Commandments, do as I say, this and this. And then I'm just going to disappear. No prophets or visionaries for a few thousand years. But boy, if you haven't done what I say when I get home, I'm going to throw you all in the lake of fire for eternity. You see, a mafioso has nothing on God. Cheap. The U.S. government, nuclear weapons, cheap compared to the sociopathic bully of a reptilian deity that is taken from the relationship of the parent to the child and projected out into the psychic ecosphere. Projected out into the psychic ecosphere to say, this is the way things are. If a parent relates to a child that way, if a school teacher relates to a child that way, if a therapist relates to a patient that way, then God is the ultimate in authority and must, of course, continue the fractal pattern, the core pattern of the strong feeding upon the weak. This is where we have the way the world works comments, the cynicism, the bitterness, you can't change the system, etc. We're the small ones, we're the fragmented ones. We don't matter. We're just used. We're just used as cogs in a wheel. Who we are, what we feel, what's in our soul has no value. So, mathematics in the reptilian paradigm, progress evolution in unconscious animals and reptiles by the strong feeding on the weak. And in doing so, when it's done in balance and partnership, when it's done with a collective consciousness, when it's done with part of a field of evolution. The lion kills off the sick, the weakest, genetically, and in doing so revitalizes the herd. The gardener picks off 30% of the apples, and the remaining apples on the tree are more lush and healthy, rather than too many apples, branches broken, not as sweet, not as big, too much crowding, not enough air, more aphids, etc. When some of the crop is thinned out, the remaining crop is more healthy. A crocodile attacks a human child because their odds of success are better than attacking a 6-foot male. A crocodile understands that you go for what is easy to win. Now, in the human paradigm, this process is inverted, because the evolutionary cycle on the planet is mirrored inside our heads. If we want to function as reptiles, we deal with the brain stem, the reptilian brain. If we want to activate the reptilian brain stem, we introduce traumas into the psychic environment. When we introduce traumas and then fail to repair those traumas, what we communicate to the individual is, you are surrounded by reptiles. You are surrounded by sociopaths who will put their interest ahead of yours, who will gang up on you with superior mass to crush you, because they are big and because you are small. And the reptilian brain knows how to deal with that with fight, flight, and freeze. When you get a little bit more maturity, when you become a little bit more human, you move into the empathic brain, and you move into consciousness. And that's why I say this is the mathematics of consciousness. It's not the mathematics of all life. Animal life, snakes, animals that sometimes eat their own young. From a reptilian framework, you've given birth to 4 little birds, and they're all hungry, which is taxing you, and flying off to get their food is taxing you. They're taking up space in the nest, which is taxing you. Why not eat a couple of them? Have fewer to feed, less noise to listen to. You have an obvious framework for unconscious instinctive survival in a sociopathic system of checks and balances. The Earth has done very well within this unconscious matrix to balance out the species. You see, it works very nicely. If the lion kills off too many zebras and grows their herd too big and then kills off more zebras, there's no more zebras to hunt. So the lion dies off as well. More accurately, the species that once existed that was not a lion that hunted on zebras died off. The lion remains because they're participating in the Partnership and Diversity Program. Nature knows that the more patterns that are on the planet, the more it is guaranteed that life will survive. If you think of life as a force and an algorithm that perpetuates life, you want diversity. The Irish potato famine killed millions of people because the principle of diversity, of biodiversity, was ignored. Because if there are thousands of acres of one vegetable, not only is the human dietary system, and palate less interesting, less pleasure, less awareness and all that, when all you eat is potatoes 3 meals a day. But if you kill off that crop, if one blight kills off that crop, millions of people die of starvation because there are no potatoes to be found. This is not nature's typical way. This is a conscious intervention because what nature doesn't do that. Nature encourages this rich partnership of diversity. Millions of species of plants, millions of species of animals, millions of microenvironments. And it all goes to guarantee one thing. It will never all be wiped out. It is the nature of life to become more and more complex and diverse and to adapt and to grow with time. And out of all of that diversity and adaptation that ensures the continuity of the algorithm called life, the algorithm that says, why not do that as well? Why not have a mutation where the rice gets smaller, and let's have another mutation where the rice gets bigger? Now, what's better for the rice plant? If the rice gets smaller, human beings don't eat that rice, and that rice gets to live in peace. On the other hand, if the rice gets bigger, then people start saying, let's have this be a staple for large parts of the world, where human beings now grow the rice, ensuring the rice's survival. It's being grown as it accommodates in infinite varieties and mutations. You have different sexual appetites. You like fat people, you like thin people, you like Caucasian, you like African American people. We'll have it all. There will be sex on this planet. There will be life. There will be mutation. Painful mutation, beautiful mutation, wonderful mutation, ugly mutation. Life will continue in multiple directions, on multiple dimensions, simultaneously. It will evolve. And if you blow up the planet and this and that, it will start again, and other planets will evolve. Life is inevitable in a multiverse as big as our own, and growing diversity is inevitable. And so this is the biological and unconscious instinctual system. The unconscious instinctual system of being a part of a biodiverse planet. When we move into a conscious system, one of the things that we develop is empathy. We develop memory, and we feel empathy for our memories. We develop empathy with ourselves, with our past selves. We develop empathy with our future selves. We see people like us being shamed and hurt in a cult that shames and hurts homosexuals or whatever our little subgroup is that is being shamed and hurt in our cult. And we empathize with the other person because we imagine ourselves in that position. In a cult that shames homosexuality through its religious dogmas, through its social norms, to be discovered in one's sexual authenticity is to be deranked, is to risk death on economic terms, on social terms, and on physical terms, depending on the barbaric framework, how much of the cult is in the reptilian brain. Because the more traumatizing the environment, the more the populace occupies the reptilian brainstem. The more one is in a reptilian brainstem, the more one is in a sociopathic protocol. And in the sociopathic protocol, everything is graded from bad to good on a continuum. And the good, however it is graded by your cult, will gang up to kill, to murder, to shame, to rape, to steal from what is bad. So when the sociopathic reptilian brainstem is awakened in the human being, the rich will feed on the poor and curse the poor. The strong will dominate and enslave the weak. The males will rape and dishonor the females, having statistically stronger bodies. Why not? The parents will place the burdens and inadequacies of their parenting skills on the children. The bullies will pick on the weakest people. The rich will steal from and lie to the poor and hire attorneys, etc., to protect the corrupt activities. And the king or the government or the president will be above the law because they have control of the military, and who's going to take them down? Why should they obey the laws that everyone else has to do? And why shouldn't they take more money from the people and allocate it to their unique special interests? In a traumatic environment, the reptilian brain will be triggered. The degree that the reptilian brain is triggered is the degree that an instinctual sociopathic abuse protocol will be in effect, in which the big attacks, preys on, and lives off the small. And this, of course, goes into the heart of, flies in the heart of mathematics. Because if slavery built this country, you could say that the slaves are more valuable than the slave owners, who didn't do that much of the work. If the children, if the vulnerable people in the fagging system in British prep schools made the lives 50% better for the bullies at the top of the fagging system, you could say that the disenfranchised minorities are providing most of the value in a system of this nature. You could say that the sick, the elderly, and the young are feeding the lions. You could say they are the most valuable part on a mathematical level of an ecological system. They're the most valuable because the sick, the elderly, the one that strays behind the zebra keeps the lions alive. The poor and the vulnerable and the slight of body in the fagging system provides the most well-being for those at the top of the fagging system. In a culture like ours where Amazon doesn't pay any taxes because large companies have the lobbying power to change tax law so that they don't pay taxes, but that that when someone like myself will pay 50% of my whole energy in taxes, in various forms of money, etc. When someone at the bottom pays 50% in taxes, and someone at the top, the Amazon company, pays 0 in taxes, this is a byproduct of the fact that someone like me is not going to make $1 million of campaign contributions to write a law that saves me billions in taxes. But someone at the top of a hierarchical capitalist system will do just that, resulting in this dynamic. So what we're dealing with is a reptilian brain in play in a sociopathic system where we have a winner-take-all paradigm, where the richer you become, the more advantages in mass and scale you have. And if you're in a sociopathic paradigm, you use that power to benefit yourself at the expense of those most vulnerable. Who goes out of business first? If Amazon closes 30% of the malls in the United States, who goes out of business first? The most struggling businesses in the most struggling towns go out of business first. The weakest, the smallest. And who are the most struggling? The ones that have been hit the hardest before. The ones that have been hit the hardest before in an agricultural community. If the crops failed 3 years in a row, no one has money to spend in the community. So the malls in that community are the weakest. And so who are the weakest people? Those who have been hit before. We're dealing with a pathological, sociopathic cult in a reptilian brainstem, where the opportunist looks around to find the weakest individual that can be bullied and dominated by legal pressure, by financial pressure, and destroyed for the benefit of making the biggest companies, the biggest individuals, bigger. When Oracle's Ellison attacked PeopleSoft for having a superior product that ate into one of their products, the goal was to say, I am a giant bully. I will kill this company with my mass. Do not invest in this company because I will kill it. And you know I will kill it because I am a sociopath using the reptilian brain to destroy lives, to destroy diversity, and maintain my monopoly. Microsoft, the same phenomena. $30 billion kept in cash as mass to attack, dominate, bully in a dynamic. That's a very clear message. If you go along with us, you will survive on our terms. If you do not, we will destroy you. We will attack you. We will obliterate you. We will give money to your competitors. We will buy up your competitors. We will give billions to your competitors. We will threaten your customers. We will attack you in legal fronts. If we own the building, we'll evict you. We will kill you unless you do what we want, so that we, the biggest, can get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's a reptilian environment. And of course, the ultimate goal of this expansion alpha dominance paradigm, is to become the biggest one in the world in a monopoly position that allows prices to go up while quality goes down. And that amount of mass and collusion with all the various briberies to global governments to maintain a guaranteed source of feeding on the small. Feeding on the small companies, destroying the small companies, the big feeding on the small for the benefit of the 1%, for the benefit of the president, because we're not going to give our workers, we're not going to give our workers raises because now we've got more money and blah, blah, blah. Because that would be kind. It wouldn't be profitable. Well, it wouldn't be as profitable. So we're not going to do that. We're not going to honor the communities we're destroying because it wouldn't be as profitable as raping the community. We're not going to honor our temp labor. We're going to increase it. We're not going to honor our country. We're going to bring higher profits for the 1% by going overseas. Our salaries at the top that don't need an increase will go from millions to tens of millions, and your salaries at the bottom that really need an increase will go from $20 down to $10. And the shareholders, who by definition, if you have money to invest, you have more than survival, will benefit in the takings, as those who cannot afford to invest because they do not have what's needed to survive will continue to go down. And the disparity between the top bully, the top alpha, the top leader, and the smallest, the youngest, the employee, the female, the child, the smallest, the ones on the other side of that polarity will go down. And having raped off 80% or so of the profits, if there's any fuss or kicking up of a fuss at some point, then we'll give back and we'll highlight. We stole $1 billion of jobs, but we gave $1 million to charity. And we will ask not to talk about the billions that we stole. And we will have a great press conference for the $1 million that we gave. And the press that does not fall in line with a $20 billion company, a $100 billion company, a $1 trillion company, the press that doesn't fall in line will be punished. Julian Assange is punished severely at every level for publishing the truth as a journalist about the corruption of power in the U.S. government, because the U.S. government has positioned itself as the largest military dominance force on the planet. So we have the peak alpha. So to the degree when you have this disproportionate power, spending 10 to 20 times more in military power than any other government on the planet, when you have this disproportionate position in one country, to the degree that there is a traumatic environment, childhood abuse, alcoholism, addiction. See, suicides have overtaken car accidents in the United States. That's a lot of pain. 1 in 7 Americans are substance addicts. That's a lot of pain. They've shown that rats, for example, do not get as addicted to to substances, do not actually die or become addicted to substances when they have safe, calm, community-based environments, as opposed to the pathological, sociopathic environments set up in a lab, which are so cruel. Our white scientists in white coats being so disconnected from our animal ancestors that there's mild curiosity on the airwaves, in the behavior, in the facial expressions, as thousands of rats are killed for experiments. When a rat is in that level of sociopathic environment, away from family, away from nature, in bright lights, they will kill themselves in a traumatized state by addicting to drugs. But you put those same rats on beautiful meadows, in healthy generational birth cycles, with lots of food that they like to eat, with mates, with community. If you put them in an empathic environment, they are not interested in the drugs. One can tell that when a child in this culture knows that they are loved, knows that they are valued, knows that their feminine self is as honored as their masculine self, understands that their truth and authenticity, their passion, their creativity is welcome and will be celebrated in their environment, they have no desire, believe it or not, to escape the healthy, loving environment in which they find themselves. It is people in helplessness, in pain, in shame, in grief, in terror, in loneliness, in rage that cannot be spoken, in confusion, in betrayal, in despair, that find poisons that numb consciousness to be preferable to living in that state surrounded by reptiles who do not respond to the pain. The reptilian brain is defined by a sociopathic state in which someone can be in enormous levels of pain and everyone around them knows it. And rather than pitching in and saying this is our job to own this pain and lift the burden that has been concentrated to toxic levels in a few of our individuals, that it is our job to lift that pain, we abandon the person and blame them with an underlying edict that says it's your problem, not ours, so you fix it, not us. We don't even want to invite you to the party when you have the indecency to reveal our sociopathic cruelty by communicating the pain that you feel. You have two choices in a sociopathic cult. Hide your pain or take the full burden and do not contribute any to anyone else. Hide the pain and pretend, oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. Okay, you can play. Because we do not care about you. We want to feel good, and we do not want to feel bad. And poor people make us feel bad, so we get rid of them. We want to feel good. We do not want to feel bad. I want to feel good. I do not want to feel bad. You have a need for money. I've got money. That makes me feel guilty. Get the fuck out of my house. Come back when you're rich and can make me feel good. we're dealing with a reptilian brainstem. And one of the things that triggers the reptilian brainstem is the phenomena of pain being too much to bear in the empathic levels of the brain. When pain reaches a certain point, you either need to start weeping and change the system, or you have to dissociate from individuals who bring up the pain, bury them, lie to cover and deny the pain, or you have to go numb and enter a sociopathic state in which you don't feel the pain. You just have the thought over and over again, that's not my problem, that's your own fault. You have an anesthetic that brings one down into the reptilian brain. Because empathic anesthetics, blame, judgment, defense, numbness, deflection, avoidance, minimizing. Someone says, I'm in a lot of pain. The response is, well, it can't be that bad. Come on. Keep feeling pain because I don't want to change my course of action. Can't be that bad. I don't want to admit that I'm a sociopath. I don't want to find out how much pain there is. I don't want to respond. I don't want to respond, so I will say, it can't be that bad. How bad is it really when Dad sticks his dick up a 6-year-old vagina? Well, it can't be that bad. She'll get over it. And I don't want to deal with the sociopathic animal my husband has become in a sociopathic cult, in a capitalist hierarchy. I don't want to deal with him. I will let my 6-year-old daughter deal with him. I know it's not good, but it can't be that bad, can it? It's only sex. And in a sociopathic cult, when the neighbor finds out there is gossip, there is no protection of the little girl. Perhaps the gossip can get the male fired. Then he'll lose his job. Maybe they could buy the house at a deep discount, a distressed property, as another family has been destroyed under the pressures of emotional illiteracy, biological illiteracy. We learn nothing about the empathic and transcendent brain in school. Relational illiteracy. We learn nothing about the empathic sociopathic continuum. We learn about a sociopathic God that will punish us for following in God's footsteps. God wants to talk out of a burning plant? Have at it. God wants to condemn people in lakes of fire? Be my guest. God wants to send the chosen people. Heaven help the chosen people off in the desert for 40 years? Sounds like a fucked up sociopathic older brother to me. And yet, when the older brother takes his sister out to the forest and says, oh, there's great things out here, just a little bit further, sister, a little bit further, and then runs off and leaves her screaming in the dark, unable to find herself in the wood. Isn't he just copying God? Just on a smaller scale. He didn't have 40 years to set up the joke. He didn't have a desert on hand. He just terrified and abandoned and traumatized her in the forest. And do the grown-ups really want to understand the traumatic brainstem? Do they want to learn how to heal the broken trust that that little girl feels as she understands that the reason she will always be bullied is because she's female, isn't as strong, because it's too tiring for the grown-ups in her life to study traumatic literature or to release the fear. It's too painful for her parents to know how much loneliness she went through for those timeless hours. And so they say, there, this is nothing. Your brother didn't mean it. Yes, he did. Yes, you did. This is sociopathic cruelty and an abandonment of a child in a dissociated and traumatized state, a state that triggers the reptilian brainstem until there is a competency and an empathy present in the community enough to help that little girl come back in her body and understand the wound of the cult that has been run through her system and pierced through her heart and left there to bleed under the burial ground of, oh, it was nothing. Because I don't want to remember what it was like to be 6 years old. I don't want to feel that again. So I'll ask you to move on and stop crying so that I don't have to feel what you're going through, and I don't have to examine my cult. I don't have to examine my family system that has put things in this state. So this is sociopathic, reptilian, instinctual program. The weak are fed to the strong, and balance is maintained in some way. As we move into human consciousness and empathy, however, a different program comes on. And whereas the survival and biodiversity and balancing system in an animal or reptilian system are instinctive and sociopathic, the human brain has the capacity for empathy through the power of imagination. And the power of imagination allows us to say, wow, what must it feel like to be the weakest person, to be the most helpless, to be terrified of pain, to know that no one will protect us, that when we really need the most help, that's when the banks will foreclose, that when we really need medicine, that's when the hospital rejects us for not paying our bills. That when we are very elderly and need company and need support, that's when we get stuck in an old folks' home with low-wage, often abusive staff who feel power at the controls. I can lock you up in a room. I can put you in solitary. I won't bring you what you want. You better do what I say. When people at the bottom of an economic ladder are given feminine positions, nursing, teaching, care of the young, we're not going to pay you at all for care of the young. Care of the elderly, we'll give you a low-paying job. And by the way, in our system, the strong, the one with a lot of money, shape a lot of the legal and political power structures that make your life worse and the top 1% better. When the trauma, when the grief, when the anger and resentment set in, when the pain sets in for this kind of treatment, you are viewed as less than because you care for our elderly, or you are viewed as worthless. We will not pay you a dime to care for our young. It is the mother's job to do it. There is an anger. There is a rage that is natural. But the small one never beats the big one when they come head to head. The 200, 400, 600-pound sumo wrestler is not toppled by a 6-year-old boy. And when the crowd enjoys the sport of the big destroying the small, where does that anger go? It goes to some part smaller. It goes to the children. It goes to the females. It goes to the rape of our 6-year-old daughters. And it goes to the violation, the humiliation, the degradation of our most vulnerable elderly by our underpaid old folks' home staff who really don't want to be taking care of someone that the cult has decided is not that important. And yet there is so much grief in the empathic centers of the brain that, unlike many of the thousands of cults in human history that honored their elders, that gave them an important role in the memory and the storytelling, in the teaching, and in the survival of the tribe, we have decided through the cult alignment with capitalism that the elderly cost more money than they make. And so unless they are rich and can spend lots of money in young people's business, they are not welcome. They are bad. They are a drain on the economy. Because to be rich in a capitalist cult is to survive and be secure of that survival and to have a semblance of love and belonging. If you are a billionaire and you fall down the stairs, it goes through your mind as a teenager. I'll call the ambulance. I'll help him get up. I'll make sure he knew it was me, and maybe I'll get a reward. When money is valued more than the people who make it, one's wealth determines survival, security, love, and belonging after a fashion. One could say it is the love of the person's money and the welcome of the person's money into the environment. If you're a billionaire and want to tell your story for the 15th time of some little joke, people listen. In a cult where money is good and poverty is bad. Because if you've got lots of it by association, you just might be good too. The money definitely is good, and if it belongs to you, well, it's like being friends with someone who's cool. Cool being elevated for its reference to the sociopathic end of the continuum. To be warm is to be empathic. To be cool is to be sociopathic. So these outplays of our value hierarchy are inevitable, are self-evident. You just look, this is happening. If you believe in science in any particular way, then there is a reason for what is happening. If you believe in data analysis and gathering, then you start with, this is happening. All over our old folks' homes, our elderly are left to feel small, ugly, unvaluable, and unwanted. Many of them are abused at one time or another. Throughout our child population, we have trauma, abandonment, shame, and addiction. Throughout our grown-up population, we have competitiveness, envy, fear, anxiety, frustration, helplessness. Throughout our parental situation, we have a lot of fear, a lot of guilt, a lot of ignorance. Our homeless populations are growing. Loneliness is increasing. Stable quality friendships decreasing. Suicides have overtaken car fatalities in the United States and have contributed, along with opioid addiction, to the shortened American lifespan. I can see more struggling individuals in my own town than I can in a much poorer economic culture in Thailand, where families are ranked higher, where at $300 or $400 a month in gross income, I see less homelessness by a factor of 10 in Thailand than I do in one of the richest counties of the United States, Marin County. And my mayor and my local government will not respond to detailed emails in this arena, because poor people are not as valuable as rich people. Rich people writing about money get a response. Poor people trying to live are persecuted by multiple different laws that make safe, legal places to sleep impossible for many of them. But luncheon after luncheon takes place in fancy restaurants to discuss how the rich can get a little richer, how the mayor can get reelected, how the status quo at the top of the power structure can be maintained, and how those at the bottom are the enemy of the system. So, we're at a transition point as a species from the instinctual, sociopathic, reptilian brainstem of dominance hierarchies, which lead naturally to men climbing to the top of every power structure through the threat of physical force and the willingness to adopt sociopathic pain structures on the face of the enemy. If you're willing to kill 2,000 people because they made you look small and you have the guns to do it, your fear quotient goes up and people stop talking. The democratic opponents to Vladimir Putin have not been doing that well in recent years. Who wants Who wants to be in that role when a $200 billion system by a corrupt, sociopathic politician is willing to murder, to kill, to bribe, to seize, to shame, to dominate and bully the entire power structure of a country to make sure they stay in power? Who wants to be the lone dissenting voice in Mitt Romney, following faith and conscience to vote to convict the top white male of a power structure of crimes, misdemeanors, abuses of power that are protected only because they are at the top of the power structure? Meaning, if I, as a teacher in a school system, withheld aid, withheld support for our students, unless the students gave me dirt on another teacher, I would be fired, and this would be an outrage. Because the parents are bigger than someone in such a lowly position as teaching our children. When we understand that the people with money are important and teachers have very low salaries, when we understand that grown-ups and big people are important and children not so much, the teacher would, of course, be thrown out. But when the president of the biggest military country withholds aid from an ally at a key time to dig up dirt on a political rival, when public money is reallocated for a dominance and abuse dynamic of a U.S. president, and one Republican senator does their job and tells the truth, they are, of course, attacked by the president, by the top people on Fox News. They are attacked because they threaten the dominance hierarchy, and because they are the small one. They are going against the group, so the group can bully the small one. And the sociopathic system is maintained. With consciousness comes the possibility of empathy, imagination, understanding, and vision. And if the reptilian brain and the instinctual brain and the unconscious field of the animals was the best way to ensure the continuing genetic development. You see, when you cut off the elderly, the young, you see, a lion doesn't care which zebra falls behind in the pack. If the lion attacks right after a zebra has been born, the baby zebra is lunch for the lion. If the lion attacks as someone in the herd has gotten a broken leg, they are the lunch for the lion. The lunch of the lion is anyone with misfortune, age, in that dynamic, systematically applied over time. The individual or the tribe as a whole is strengthened genetically as the sick and elderly are unable to breed, are taken out of the pack, as the disabled are not able to pass on a genetic defect. And in this way, survival of the fittest is beneficial for the herd field as well as the predator. The predator always gets the easiest path to food. The herd gets the strongest genetic stock able to reproduce. So there's a partnering in sustainability. And if the predatory animal kills off too much of its game, it gets harder and harder for them, because there's always in a herd of 1,000 or so, there's always a few elderly, a few children. There's enough for a few lions. But if you grow your pride, your lion pride, too big, and you focus on the monocrop of a particular species, like zebras, if you put all your eggs in one basket and you start picking off the herbs, well, you quickly eat up the elderly, the young, the disabled. And now you have to run faster. Meanwhile, the more you hunt a tribe or a herd of zebras, the more you hunt them, the more muscle they build. So you wear down as they grow stronger, as the whole herd gets sharper and sharper at lookout strategies, as they run faster and more regularly, as they develop new strategies, it becomes harder and harder to feed on them. At the same time, you've already killed off the easy prey. And so it's a path of diminishing returns. It's a path of diminishing returns. The same path of diminishing returns that a human being deals with when they start fishing for salmon, and more salmon, and more salmon. You can ultimately, or pursuing oil, you can ultimately kill every last salmon, extract every ounce of oil from the planet at higher and higher costs per barrel. But at some point, if there is instinct involved, the lion stops breeding and the balance is restored. The lion goes after another animal that's more plentiful and the balance is restored. And in this way, there is a diversity of life, and the ultimate edict that life will be and life will develop, that life will grow, continues in one form or another. What I want to talk about now is the math of consciousness, which is a different field. You have the instinctual reptilian brain field. Now you have the human empathic and transcendent field. And there are trade-offs, of course. One has to think. One has to observe. One has to grow in order to embrace this field. So within the conscious empathic brain program, one of the things that we can say is a bottom line is that every human being wants to feel sustainably good and doesn't want to feel chronically bad, which is the contrast point. So if you're given the choice, press this button and feel sustainably good, or press this button and feel sustainably bad, you're going to press the sustainably good button because you want to feel good, you don't want to feel bad. Now, you're given a neutral choice. If you're given another choice, press this button and feel sustainably bad, or walk a mile and press that button and feel sustainably good. See, now we're dealing, are we in an instinctual terrain or not? We're dealing with how traumatic is the environment around us. Meaning, if you beat a child, if you shame a child, if you violate a child from before language, they will understand in no uncertain terms the extent of the sociopathic brain. They will understand the extent of the sociopathic cult around them, because an empathic cult can tell who is and isn't abusive, one. An empathic cult helps respond to abusive individuals by teaching them other ways of engaging. So the fact that someone is chronically sociopathic is symptomatic of a chronically sociopathic cult. Some people get the abuse more than others, but this triggers the reptilian brainstem. Now, when a child understands that it is in a reptilian environment from before birth, it will behave in a reptilian way, and so one cannot count on this delayed gratification. But if you are not in an abuse loop, if you are not in a regressed, repressed, traumatized state, if you do not have a contract with your abuser that says you have to take pain and abuse in order to survive, feel secure, feel love and belonging, you will walk the mile and press the button. It is inevitable, because we all want to sustainably feel good and we don't want to sustainably feel bad. So this is a very important thing, that there is an effort. We are willing to invest energy to increase feeling sustainably good and avoid feeling sustainably bad. That this is the framework that the empathic brain and imagination starts framing. You see, this is the problem at this intersection as an abuse cult and an instinctive species becomes a conscious species, is that if you understand that you're in a sociopathic cult in which the bully, in which the Trumps will attack the Mitt Romneys for voting their conscience, well, I'm referring to impeachment, then you've got a divided self, because you want to feel good, which means you don't want to be attacked by the top alpha in a sociopathic paradigm. Because when the top alpha is sociopathic in a sociopathic paradigm, then the fact that they've got the biggest mass puts the odds against you, and you will take a hit, as Mitt Romney talked about in his emotional choice to be the sole Republican to vote that, yes, the president did commit crimes for which most people in government would be removed, and that it's more important for a top person in government to uphold the law than for a clerk who would undoubtedly be fired for manipulating large sums of money, etc., within the store. It's something that doesn't affect the country that much at all. But a president must be protected because they have the alpha position, and they have when you have identity politics or identity consciousness, you have to elevate the person who is most likely to dominate the enemy, whether they're sane or insane, whether not, because it's about domination. It's not about empathy. It's not about consciousness. So we want to feel good and we don't want to feel bad. And because we have imagination and time, if we understand that to take opium feels really good right now, but then it's never going to feel that good again, and then it's going to feel terrible and it's going to destroy our life, then the empathic, logical brain does not want to take opium. Now, the reptilian brain, that's in a lot of pain and looking for pain management strategies, says, give me the opium right now. We're not looking at forward thought and imagination. So the more trauma there is, the more pain there is, the more pain there is, the more compulsive addiction there is to alleviate the pain. Now, if you look at many of our drives, you think, no one's going to tell me what to do, the American way, the freedom doctrine. No one's going to tell me what to do. I'm my own person. And one person after another person after another person after another person is having a beer in an obese state in front of a TV that's spewing out advertisement, violence, whatever, that is not producing a lot of well-being. You could say it's a pain management strategy. You can see that freedom, for example, is not self-referential. It depends how you use the freedom. If you use your freedom to destroy your own life out of ignorance or helplessness, and stuff, if you use your own freedom to destroy your life, it's not always a good thing to be free. Meaning, if we understand we all want to feel good and we don't want to feel bad, many people use their freedom in ignorance or in instinct to over time feel worse than if they didn't have as much freedom. And studies have even been done to show that the more freedom you give people to back analyze their choices, that the less happy they are with their present reality. And you can look at force. You can say, well, power is good, right? Who doesn't want power? I want freedom. I want power. Power is good. But you can use power to destroy your life, to destroy the planet, to destroy other people, or you can use power to help other people. So it's a lot of these things are neutral. Freedom is neutral. It depends how you use it. Power is neutral. It depends how you use it. And intelligence. For example, what if you use intelligence, understanding physics, etc., to create multiple nuclear bombs and blow up the world? Is intelligence always conducive to well-being? Well, in the deepest sense, yes, but certainly knowledge. Knowledge is neutral. You see, if a terrorist doesn't know how to blow up your house and rape your sister, if they're still 2 years old and they don't have the knowledge on how to walk and how to rape and stuff, you can say knowledge is neutral in terms of this ultimate drive towards well-being. So knowledge is neutral. Power is neutral. Freedom is neutral. Having a big military is a mixed bag. It can be used to abuse. It can be used to protect the planet. Having technology is neutral. You can use it to destroy your host environment. You can use it to accelerate tree planting. For example, we could have built robots by now that planted deserts with over 3 billion trees. That could be our main planetary focus with technology, to build robots that plant trees 24/7 and that do a reclamation product and irrigate and stuff and reclaim deserts, so that every year 1 billion trees are planted and global greenhouse gases are offset by 1 billion new trees every year planted 24/7 with robots. But we can also have robots making gas cars faster and more efficiently that pollute our atmospheres. So technology is neutral. And laws are neutral. You can have a law that says black people have to be treated like animals, that you're allowed to have slaves. You can have a law that allows doctors to chop off the foreskin of all male penises without consent and with zero basis to justify an infant trauma at that level. You could have a law that allows it, and you can have a law that prevents it. So law is neutral. Power is neutral. Military, neutral. You can have an education system that indoctrinates the children of Hitler. And you can have an education system that teaches children to think and understand family systems, understand corrupt power systems, understand how to involve themselves in local government, and understand how to create human well-being. Education is neutral. It depends on its impact. The one thing that is self-referential, and cults are always self-referential. That's, it's good because we do it, and that's why we do it, because it's good, and that's why we do it. And there's no external data in there. And so freedom is good because we're a free country, because we're good, because so freedom is good. And there are very few things that are always self-referential, meaning that always create feeling good and never create feeling bad. So that's the goal. We want to feel good, we don't want to feel bad. Freedom, I remember when I first had a lot of money, I felt so stressed about it. I felt I had to do the perfect thing with, like, what do I have to do? How am I not going to avoid a mistake? It was terrible. Until I spent it off down to my comfort level, and it's like, oh my goodness, now I know what to do with this. I do the normal thing that I do. Oh, it's so nice to be normal again. This is the appeal of a cult in traumatized populaces. The cult provides a status quo, a normalcy that just says, I don't have to think, I'll just do what everyone else is doing. I'll do what I always did before. It feels comfortable. When the unknown is frightening, it means there are repressed traumas. There are memories. There's the anticipation of trauma in the unknown, more than there is the anticipation of excitement, growth, and new discovery. So, consciously creating sustainable fun is the only self-referential value. Fun feels good. It's good to feel good. Fun feels fun. We like having fun. So fun is at the top of the pyramid in self-referential values. Power is neutral. Fun is self-evident. Now, you could say, you can use a couple of these things, because we're all coming back to this core drive. We want to feel good, we don't want to feel bad. Fun feels good. Well-being feels good, as opposed to feeling sick and horrible. Goodness feels good. So you've got good, feeling fun, feeling well-being, experiencing well-being. So these are self-referential truths. They're self-referential drives. They feel good because feeling good feels good. And feeling good is good, and that's why we want to feel good. Feeling fun is fun. It's more fun to feel fun than to feel misery. It's more fun to feel fun than to be in pain. So they're self-referential, and in a way that any cult and any dogma is not. Because the cult is not always fun. It's not fun to watch a 6-year-old girl be told by her mother never to tell about the abuses of the father, because she's in such a sick cultural environment that if she tells, the family will be broken up, the father will not be healed, the 6-year-old little girl will not be given a competent father. That shame and that police that are trained in violent crime will do the work as opposed to therapists and this and that and the other. And that we will all bury it, and every abuser in the country will feel worse and more shame, but no one will get any sexual or psychological education. So the child is asked to bury the secret for the cult. the secret of the cult's incompetence. The cult's incompetence to educate the father emotionally, psychologically, traumatically, and sexually. The cult's incompetence to educate the populace on sexual fulfillment. In a cult where some marriages go years without sex, and one person wants it. This is profound incompetence. And we can see how incompetent this is if we move it into the capitalist terrain in a cult that elevates the capitalist dogma as the highest, deity. So we feel outraged if someone wants toilet paper and they have money to buy toilet paper and there's no toilet paper. Oh, we write reviews. The store was out of toilet paper. I had money to buy toilet paper. You're obstructing capitalism, the deity of our cult. But when someone has a sexual drive and they're blocked into a monopoly relationship in which no one meets the drive with dignity for months or for years, this is not viewed as a failing in the cult. It is a failing in the cult because the person has learned how to make and spend money more effectively than they've learned about their own psychology and sexuality. That is an incompetency in the cult. It comes from valuing money over well-being, in valuing the outer materialistic world more than the inner psyche. It comes from valuing objects more than the human body. If a human body is being ill-used through sexual frustration repeatedly, that is misuse of the human body. But in a chauvinistic system, things are more important than the body. The brand of clothing, whether you have the right handbag, etc., is more important than what's going on in your heart, in your mind, more feminine states. So, consciously creating sustainable fun is the only self-referential drive because it accomplishes this goal. If you are having fun, you are feeling good.